it. So our very first speaker is someone I'm very excited to introduce because not only do they do very exciting things, but they're also an alum. So that's very close to home for a lot of us watching. So we're going to be hearing from Rishi Khosla. He's the CEO and co-founder of OakNorth, which is a very exciting platform and quite unique in a lot of ways. He's going to tell us a little bit more about it. But he's, got experience in entrepreneurship as well, as he previously co-founded Amba, a financial research firm, which was then scaled up and sold off. So he'll tell us a little bit about his experience and answer some questions. And if you have any questions as well, please feel free to put them in the comments. But for now, we'll welcome Rishi. Hello, Rishi. How are you?
Excellent, Serena. Very good to be with you guys this evening.
Thank you so much for being here. So if you wouldn't mind, would you like to just introduce yourself and say what OakNorth does, and I guess what makes it unique at the current time?
Sure. Basically, OakNorth's a business which is being built to service what we call the missing middle. These are businesses which are larger than micro businesses, but smaller than large cap businesses, which generally have been the blind spot of banks and lending institutions for decades. We built a technology platform to do that, and we also have our own bank where we use our platform in the UK to service that particular segment.
Okay. And did you feel that was a segment that was particularly underserved before? Is that
Massively.
what?
I mean, whilst we were building our previous business, we actually had experience of that, and that was all the way back in 2005. And like all good things, you have a bad experience, and you say you're going to do something about it, and that's what we decided to do. So we decided to build a whole business to solve that problem which we had.
That's amazing. I'm sure a lot of the people watching will definitely feel a little bit reflected in that, because a lot of student entrepreneurs definitely, when they come up with their ideas, they do so, responding and reflecting their own experiences. And I suppose, as someone in the position, because OakNorth is so successful, right? You quickly achieve profitability, you're scaling, you're growing internationally. So I suppose the question is, how do you build a business that's going to be resilient and that's going to have a viable business model? What characteristics would you identify in such a business? Like when you build something, especially given the current situation, people are definitely concerned about resilience at the moment. So how would you go about explaining what a resilient business model is to you?
Well, I mean, again, we're pretty basic entrepreneurs, and in our view, it's pretty basic. You build a business to make money, right? And if you build a business model which is focused on actually making money, hitting cash flow positive in a short period of time, and actually, building profitably, that gives you resilience. Any business model where you don't have that, you have to have the benefit of substantive capital and investors who are willing to continually fuel that capital for you to be able to actually sustain a business where you have a large loss, a large accrued losses before you actually get to that point. So ultimately, in my view, resilience just comes with a very boring traditional business model of making money.
That's good. Well, that's definitely very universal. So in your eyes, I suppose the current pandemic won't change at all your mission or how you go about building your business.
No, if anything, it just accelerates it, because you have more businesses which actually need the support and need to be able to rely on lending to be able to get through this period. So ultimately, it's an accelerant rather than anything else. And I always believe in any crisis, you get some of the most resilient businesses are born, are scaled. As an entrepreneur, you just build tougher skin, and that's ultimately a good part of sort of the entrepreneurial journey.
I'm going to go off a little bit. You were speaking just now about how, there's more and more businesses that are needing a little bit of support now as it's getting a little bit rockier for them, especially the smaller and medium ones. And I guess a question for that would be, do you think that there is a difference between how the companies that you target, which tend to be, if I'm correct, on the larger end of SMEs, is there a difference to how they're handling this crisis versus, a lot smaller or a lot bigger?
So a lot bigger, I would say, have always had better access to capital. I would say actually even a lot smaller, through the last 5-10 years with the advent of peer-to-peer lending platforms, other platform lending businesses have ended up getting lent to better. Within the missing middle, those businesses ultimately haven't had the benefit of either of those trends, and therefore, as I said, sort of just get left behind somewhat. So I would say that's probably one of the hardest segments. And clearly, look, in the UK, if you bring it to the UK, the government's done a lot for all segments, but clearly the bounce back loans are 100% guaranteed loans, which fundamentally have very basic eligibility criteria. So if you're a very small business, your ability to get your hands on one of those is much easier than getting your hands, for example, on a CBILS loan, right? So therefore, I would sort of say still getting lent to in the missing middle is probably the hardest segment today.
Mm-hmm. And then, obviously there's a firm like yours who's providing a service specifically tailored to this kind of company. And now, you're licensing your services abroad, so it's starting to grow abroad as well. But is there anything that these firms can do themselves to position themselves to kind of weather a storm like this better, or future similar storms, do you think?
I mean, look, for any business, if you go through a crisis, the key thing always to do is to parameterize what your downside looks like, and then play for the upside. It's always good to know sort of what does a bad case look like. Make sure you're resilient for that bad case, and you know exactly what you'll do if that plays out, and then in a way put that up on the shelf, and then just go and look for the opportunities. And I think in any business at any time, there are opportunities to change, to adapt, to evolve, to actually take advantage of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's I think I'm going to take it a little bit in a different direction now and talk a little bit more specifically about OakNorth and what you guys do. So for a lot of people who might be interested in finance, they might be hearing just sort of traditional lending, I suppose. But what makes OakNorth special is the fact that you guys really integrate technology. You guys really are a fintech. Could you speak a little bit about, the technologies you use and why you think they add value to the services you offer?
Sure. So if you look at commercial lending generally, in terms of actually doing the credit analysis, making the decision, monitoring loans, generally everything's done offline, done manually. Very different from small ticket lending, which clearly is much more automated and driven by sort of at least the initial revolution which happened in credit cards and then came through into lending. So within this segment, what we've developed is a platform to actually help conduct the credit analysis and the monitoring of commercial loans using data sources which tap into both traditional and alternative areas and are very specific to the industry subsectors. So we divided the world into 1,600 different subsectors. We've identified data sources for each individual subsector, traditional, alternative. We pipe that into our platform, which actually helps us then, as you get a particular opportunity in one of these subsectors, run scenarios, run the right type of analysis to then be able to come out with what does a credit view look like of that particular loan, and then on an ongoing basis to monitor it on that basis as well. So you're sort of combining analytical technology with large data sets.
Mm-hmm. And that seems like it would mean that the labor force, I guess the talent that you guys are seeking, would be a different landscape to those in traditional, I suppose, to more traditionally focused banks. Do you think that the talent and the way you go about, sorry?
Massively.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, so effectively we have what we call credit scientists, which are a combination of credit analysts and data scientists, because again, wherever we're touching data, our objective is to effectively get to a point where the machine learning does more and more of the role and much less gets done manually.
And do you think that this is a trend that we're going to see movement in all sort of aspects of commercial lending, not just from a fintech, but the incumbents are actually going to start moving this direction. Because as we've seen, OakNorth has been highly successful in what it does. Do you think it's a model that bigger banks are starting to move towards?
I think it's a model which every large bank should move towards on the OakNorth platform.
Oh, okay. I like that answer. And speaking on that, actually, so the platform is actually being licensed out
Yep.
internationally.
Yep.
And I was looking into you guys, and so it seems like you had trouble securing a loan here, then ended up getting a much larger loan actually abroad, right? In America, if I'm correct. So do you think that like that geography basically plays a lot into how your services are received or the kind of services that are
You
required?
know, the same issue of the missing middle applies nearly in every major market, right? The difference is that in our own experience, we never got loans from commercial banks, but ultimately the US bank that we got it from was an investment bank, and we got it from their proprietary trading desk. So ultimately it was about going to the guys who do large cap loans and getting them to do it. So it's much more sort of who you were going to rather than the geography of where they were.
Okay, that's interesting. And do you think that that's a model you'll continue to focus on a lot, the licensing of a platform,
Fully,
moving to kind of banking as a service as well?
without a doubt.
Hmm. Okay, that'll be interesting. I think for a lot of people, it's an interesting idea that they might not be aware of is like a company licensing its material out. What prompted you to consider doing that rather than just setting up base internationally?
The mission was very simple. The mission's always been to help solve borrowing for the missing middle, and our view is in terms of the ability to get that done quickly at scale across major markets. Having a model where we actually enable the incumbents is a much quicker way, much more scalable manner to achieve what our mission is, rather than trying to go and set up our own lending institutions in each individual market.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And if I move, I suppose, back to a larger lens, is, for the people who might have been considering going into entrepreneurship and they were considering actually getting loans, what do you think? Do you think anything has changed in the landscape now because of the pandemic at all?
I mean, look, the amount people's risk appetites in terms of their willingness to lend, to invest, etc., has all pared back, which is somewhat expected in the current environment, given when there's uncertainty. People generally tend to be much more cautious. So I think, inevitably that's happened.
Mhm. And regarding the pandemic as well, a lot of institutions are now starting to use data basically to mitigate the effects and to learn more about it and respond more dynamically. Do you think that the institutions adopting this kind of technology will spread? Because there were with the loans in America, a lot of people were not satisfied with how the government carried out that situation. Do you think that it'll be time for the institutions to step in and encourage the applications of data in fields such as lending as well, or do you think it'll be driven by lenders and borrowers?
So, like I mentioned, we're already using significant amounts of data in the decisioning that we run through our platform. In terms of other institutions wanting to use data, look, that's absolutely increasing, because when you can get granularity, you can get a better handle on your exposures. Clearly, that's better than not, and that's actually why with our platform, for example, we're getting a significant acceleration in adoption by other banks as a function of that.
Mm. And we've just gotten a question from a viewer who's asked what the types of data that OakNorth uses. And I guess following on from that, do you have any thoughts on, methods of collecting data, or I mean thoughts on, the uses of data and due diligence, I guess, in business in general?
So in terms of like the type of data, it totally depends on what sector. So I don't know, if you're running a analysis on a furniture manufacturer, you'd be looking at sort of what's the cost of raw material, what's the cost of processing, i.e. production, what's the cost of distribution, what's the cost of sales and marketing, what's happening to demand in different segments, etc. So it's all really fundamental data, and like I said, sort of mapped across what's relevant for each of the individual subsectors across 1,600 different subsectors, right? So there are thousands and thousands of different types of data sources which we're getting. So that's the type of data. And sorry, the second part of your question was
on the collection of the data.
In terms of the collection of the data. I mean, look, there's even if you're using third-party data, there's just such a challenge because so much of it is unstructured data, and you're trying to take unstructured data and make it structured to be able to help actually create a framework of analysis. So that whole process is incredibly how can I put it, challenging. In terms of for ourselves, given we also do help organizations monitor loans, there's a significant amount of data which we're generating within our own platform, which actually over a period of time will both give us we've already got depth, will give us depth and longitudinal data series, which I think will be incredibly valuable.
Mm-hmm. And so then that comes back again to, I suppose, having talent that's really going to be focusing on, that's going to be really qualified about this particular market. Yep. And I know we have some members who are master students who study, business intelligence, data science, this kind of thing. And then we also have a lot of undergraduates. So would you recommend that they at least find some sort of skill set relating to data science and these kind of quantitative analytical methods?
Look, I mean, again, to make that very broad is always hard. Do I think data science is of value? Do I think its applicability is broad across lots of different domains? Absolutely. But do I clearly is a sort of like a need to have for every graduate? That's a really hard one, but I'd sort of say it's an incredibly valuable skill set.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose for a lot of graduates, they're deciding as well. They hear about, successful fintechs like yours, maybe people who maybe had thought that they were definitely going to go along a traditional career path of, joining a big company and then just kind of sticking in the corporate space. How I suppose, what would your advice be? Should they stick with it, or should they jump into something totally new and start a business that's unique and in a market that's not really served, like OakNorth? Or I guess, how would you counsel people who are concerned about what to do with their careers?
Look, I'm absolutely an entrepreneur. And for me, spending a life in a large company in a corporate environment is the most boring thing I could ever imagine. Now, for some people, you know what, that works, right? So it all depends in terms of how you're built. The fun, the impact you can have, the learning you can have, the difference you can make in the world is just totally different, I think, as an entrepreneur. And whether that's joining an earlier stage business, setting up your own business, for me, that's incredibly rewarding. Because again, you go start something and you create and you evolve. Even if you join something early stage, you see it evolve and you've had a significant part to do with it, rather than sort of a cog in a very large machine.
Mm-hmm. And yourself, in your own experience, when you founded OakNorth, and I think also when you previously founded Copal, you did it so with the same business partner. So I presume that it's been, like a very long and successful business relationship. How would you counsel people to determine whether or not someone is a business partner that they can work with for the long haul?
I mean, look, so 100%. Incredibly valuable to have a strong business partner, because it's an incredibly lonely journey being an entrepreneur. The fact is, it's closer than many marriages in terms of the interaction that you have, right? So it's sort of you need to make the choice really carefully and sort of based on a lot a lot of knowledge on how you guys sync as individuals, and how the chemistry works, because there's going to be ups and downs all the time.
Excuse me. Yeah, that's definitely, I think a lot of people are definitely worried about the loneliness of the mission and about making mistakes by themselves when setting up a company and not having any guidance. So for students who know they want to be entrepreneurs, they're like you, they can't imagine sitting, in an office all day, working under 300 people. Where would you say they should go to be mentored, or where should they seek advice? Or is it just 100% trial and error, do it yourself, fail yourself?
I mean, look, I think the value of mentors, good mentors, is incredibly high. And ultimately, in my view, go and think about the best mentor for whatever you're going to do, and just approach them and just ask them for 10 minutes of their time. And it's amazing if you ask what you get. And sometimes those relationships can evolve. I mean, UCL has access to also lots of great alum, etc., which could be helpful. So I think there are lots of avenues to find a good mentor. Again, there just needs to be a desire to go out and hunt for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Hopefully people will take a look at the UCL alum and find some really exciting people like how we found
Exactly.
you. Yeah, we got really lucky. Um, and you mentioned earlier that, people might be entrepreneurs looking in a lot of different fields, the members who might be, watching this now or later when it goes up. Are there any fields that you think like COVID will particularly impact more or less than others? We've heard from other speakers that they think that for fintechs and tech in general, this is, like you said, it's really an accelerant for those kinds of services right now. Do you think that's true, or do you think there are any industries that are going to have a harder time of it?
Look, I think that's definitely true. I think that that fintech specifically gets an accelerant out of this. Are there going to be sectors which suffer? Of course. I mean, physical retail, it's going to have an accelerant on a trend which was already playing out, but a negative trend, right? Not a positive trend. Well, how's it going to play out for, I don't know, commercial office space? Unclear, right? There are other industries which clearly short term, even maybe in the medium term, will get hit, but will probably rebound, like parts of the hospitality sector. But you sort of put those aside. I mean, generally for tech, this has to be an accelerant.
Mm-hmm. Also because for tech, working from home, which is kind of where everyone's at right now, is a lot easier and even a lot more common before. So they have a starting place from which to continue to stay efficient and be productive. Is that true at OakNorth? Are you having an easier time, do you think, than other firms with maintaining productivity and work during this time?
I mean, look, I think that if anything, productivity has actually gone up during this period. Um, is it sustainable at these levels on a long-term basis? Probably not at sort of how much it's gone up. But in terms of the transition to working from home, given that we're a fully cloud-hosted business, it was incredibly easy to do the switch over. So without flaws. So it's been fine, but clearly there's an immense amount of value from a social perspective, from a culture perspective, of bringing teams together and having that physical interaction, which I know for a number of our team is something which is missing in sort of the isolated environment of working from home.
And so you think that eventually firms and even OakNorth will regress back to a majority of time being spent physically in the office? You don't think working from home will persist as a trend, as some people think it will?
I think working from home will definitely persist as a trend. The question is, will it be the minority or the majority of what people do? And I think most firms will say some part of their employee base will work from home on a continuous basis, whether that's the same roles or not is TBD. But look, I think most people will make some structural change, but whether that's the majority of their teams or not, I think fewer firms will move that way.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that it's easier for you as well because you're totally cloud hosted as a business. And we see that, I think, in a lot of like banking as a service companies or companies that offer services that way. It tends to be easier. Could you maybe speak a little bit about the differences between cloud versus physically hosting, just for the people who might not know too much?
Sure. The simple fact on cloud hosting is that you're not tied into a more rigid environment, and fundamentally you're used to accessing your environment over the web. So it almost doesn't matter where you are, as long as you've got connectivity, you can access your environment, and that just totally changes the flexibility of the architecture and the infrastructure which you have, and your ability to add more processing capability if you need it, because volumes are going up. More people are online for more of the day because there are less, offline meetings, etc., etc. So all those things are so easy just to scale up infrastructure in a way where it's really not on a physical basis.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like for you, the goals aren't going to change at all about this pandemic. What, I suppose, should we be looking forward to from OakNorth, for this year and, moving forwards? Is there anything particularly that you're really keen to work on?
I mean, ultimately, it's continuing our mission. I mean, I believe in massive focus and sort of keeping fully aligned to the goal, and therefore accelerating the effect that we want to have on the missing middle.
Mm. That's I like that. It's catchy. And for students who are aiming to join a fintech company, and I know a lot of students are worried, actually, on the previous topic about quantitative job skills, that they aren't hackers, so they can't work at a fintech. Do you have any thoughts on, is it really just a whole bunch of computer programmers, or should people
Look,
still?
there are lots of roles, right? There's sort of the product role, there's the marketing role, there's the client role. So there are lots of different areas within any fintech business, within any business. So yes, sort of the coding is a core part, but there are lots of other functions around the business.
Mhm. Okay, and we're just now running out of time. So if you have anything that you'd like to leave the people who might be seeing this now or later with, any final thoughts for students who desperately need the advice?
The best time to start a business is now, and the toughest time always teach you the best lessons. So if you've got an idea, you should go for it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Hopefully,
Thank you.
people will take advantage of that advice and definitely listen to it closely. Thank you so much for being here, Rishi.
Excellent.
Hopefully, we'll
Take care.
see more of you around. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.